You ever wake up and feel like something followed you back? Like a piece of the night didn't let go, clinging to the edges of your mind, slipping into the spaces where dreams fade. You tell yourself it was nothing, just a trick of sleep, a leftover echo of something your brain made up. But what if it wasn't? What if some places, some moments, don't stay where they belong? What if they reach beyond sleep, beyond memory, and settle into the quiet corners of your life, waiting? What if it wasn't a dream at all, and maybe, just maybe it was a reality of things to come? It started with a voice, not just any voice, but one that seemed to burrow into my skull, threading images through my thoughts as if they were my own memories. I was sitting in a studio, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just hearing it, just feeling it. The details of my presence there blurred at the edges like a fading dream, but I was certain of one thing. I was on a talk show. The host was faceless, at least in my recollection. Their voice was smooth, practiced, the kind that could convince anyone to believe anything. And then there was the guest, a girl, young, no older than 10 maybe. She had dark eyes, hollow but pleading, her voice barely above a whisper. She begged to go home. There was something wrong with her tone. Not desperate, not afraid, just determined, as if her request had been ignored one too many times. She kept repeating herself, her plea interspersed with warnings. She told me not to touch the crosses, not to look at them too long, just to go. The studio around me flickered, just for a moment. And then I saw them, the 3 crosses. They stood in barren land, alone, jagged like they had been planted by something other. The vision pulsed every time the girl spoke, snapping into my head with unnatural clarity. 3 crosses, 3 places, 3 warnings. The host was silent. The air in the studio had grown thick, stifling. I looked around, expecting someone to interrupt, to cut to commercial, to say something, anything. But no one did. It was just me, the girl, and the whisper of a reality I was slowly beginning to understand was not my own. I swallowed hard and forced the question out. I asked what would happen if we touched them. The girl blinked once, slowly. Then, in that same quiet, unwavering tone, she told me we wouldn't go home. The radio buzzed, the studio lights flickered, and then the call ended. The silence after the call was suffocating. The radio static faded, leaving behind an emptiness that pressed against my ears. I sat frozen in the chair, staring at the microphone, as if expecting someone to explain what had just happened. No one did. The host, the producer, if they were even real, had vanished from my mind as if they had never existed. I was alone in the dimly lit studio, the words of the girl still circling in my head. She had wanted to go home. She had warned not to touch the crosses. She had insisted that people should just leave. The images still burned behind my eyes. The barren land, the 3 crosses standing in defiance of something unseen. The way they had been arranged felt deliberate, not placed by accident or time. They were markers, boundaries, or something else entirely. The more I thought about them, the less I understood. An unease crawled up my spine, a sensation that something unseen was shifting. The studio walls felt too close, the air too thick. My chair creaked as I leaned forward, rubbing my temples, trying to shake the feeling. I had the overwhelming sense that I had just touched something I was never supposed to, that the simple act of hearing the girl's voice had changed something. My thoughts drifted back to her tone. She hadn't sounded afraid, not really. It was more like she had been tired of repeating herself, as if she had done this before, as if she already knew what came next. I wasn't supposed to know about the crosses. I wasn't supposed to see them. The thought hit me like a fist in the gut. Somewhere in the depths of my mind, I could still see them, standing in a dead landscape, unmoving, waiting. I could feel the weight of them, their presence pressing at the edges of my consciousness like something trying to slip through. A low hum filled the studio, so faint I almost didn't notice it. It wasn't coming from the speakers, nor was it the air conditioning. It was deeper, heavier, like the sound of the earth itself vibrating. I needed to leave. Pushing back from the table, I stood, but the moment my feet hit the floor, my balance wavered. The studio blurred for a split second, like a film reel skipping a frame. My heart slammed against my ribs. I gripped the edge of the table, willing the sensation away. Then, in the corner of my vision, something shifted. A shadow passed just beyond the glass of the control room, something tall and motionless. My breath hitched. But when I turned to look directly at it, nothing was there. The hum was louder now, sinking into my bones. I wasn't alone. The hum didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the walls or the speakers or the wires running through the floor. It was coming from inside me, vibrating through my bones, settling into the space just behind my ribs, a pressure I couldn't shake. I stumbled toward the door, every step heavier than the last. The air felt thick, like walking through water, slow and heavy and wrong. My hand found the door handle, but it felt too smooth, too cold. My fingers wouldn't close around it properly. The moment stretched too long. Time felt stretched too long. Then the lights flickered, and in that half second of darkness, I felt something move behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see. The door finally gave way, swinging open, and I staggered out into the hallway. It was too dark. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, flickering in a rhythm that made me nauseous. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, like the building had grown in the seconds I had been inside that room. The hum followed. My breath came too fast, chest rising and falling like I had been running, but I hadn't. I had barely moved. The hallway seemed to breathe with me, expanding, contracting, pulsing with a rhythm I couldn't match. My footsteps barely made a sound against the floor. I needed to get out. The front door was just ahead, just a few steps away, just within reach. Then the walls shuddered. Not violently, not loud, just enough. Enough to make me stop, enough to make my stomach drop, enough to make the certainty I had felt about the world crack at the edges. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this hallway, not in this moment, not anywhere near the girl or the crosses or whatever was waiting for me in the spaces I wasn't looking at. The radio station was empty. It shouldn't have been. I should have heard voices, footsteps, something. But there was nothing, just me in the too long hallway and the soundless world pressing in on me from all sides. I forced myself forward, one step, then another, every muscle in my body resisting like I was walking into a storm. The door loomed ahead, too far away, no matter how close I got. The lights buzzed louder. The hum in my chest grew sharper. Then, just before I reached it, the door handle turned. From the other side. The door never opened. It just stopped moving. The handle turned, paused, then slowly clicked back into place. Something had been there, just on the other side, just out of sight. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned, pushed forward, my feet moving before my mind could catch up. I wasn't thinking, wasn't deciding. I just knew I couldn't go through that door. Not anymore. The hallway stretched, twisted, narrowed. I didn't recognize this place. It should have led back to the recording rooms, the office, the lobby, but instead, I found myself stepping into open air. The walls were gone. The floor beneath me was solid, cracked stone, uneven beneath my shoes. The sky stretched above, but it wasn't the sky I knew. It was colorless, depthless, a void that pulsed like it was alive. And in the distance, waiting for me, were the crosses. 3 of them, just like the girl had said. They stood at different distances, crooked and splintered, planted into the barren earth like they had been left there to rot. The hum in my chest grew unbearable. I clenched my fists, forced myself to move forward. I didn't know why I was here. I didn't know how, but I knew what I had to do. My hands found a broken branch, dry and brittle, left abandoned at my feet. Without thinking, I bent down, fingers curling around it. It snapped too easily, the sound too loud in the heavy silence. There was something above me, shifting in the void, watching. I tried to ignore it. I pulled another branch, stripped the pieces down. The cross had to be remade. That much I understood. It wasn't a conscious thought, not a decision, but something deeper, older. A rule written into the bones of this place. I tied the pieces together with something that shouldn't have been there, vines that moved on their own, curling around my fingers, tightening before I could pull away. That's when I noticed her. The girl? Standing just at the edge of my vision, silent, still. She wasn't smiling yet, but she was watching, waiting. She didn't move, not at first, just stood there, watching, her dark eyes reflecting none of the dim, pulsing light from the void above. There was something unnatural about the way she held herself, too still, too rigid, like she wasn't used to being in her own body. The thought struck deep, lodged itself somewhere in my ribs. Was this even her body? Was she ever real at all? I wanted to ask her something, anything, but my mouth was dry. My tongue felt thick. The hum in my chest hadn't stopped. It had only changed. No longer just a vibration, but a presence. Something behind my sternum that was aware of me, pushing, pressing, waiting. The girl tilted her head slightly, just enough to make my stomach turn. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like she was adjusting to a form she wasn't meant to have. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't a lost child waiting for someone to help her. She was exactly where she wanted to be. A deep horror settled in, a realization too big to put into words. She had never been trapped here. I was. The space around us was wrong. The land didn't stretch properly, the horizon shifting just at the edges of my vision, flickering like a film struggling to stay in focus. And beyond that horizon, hidden between the twisted branches of dead trees, something else was there. I didn't see it. I didn't have to. I felt it. The woods weren't empty. Something was moving, shifting between the trees, waiting for me to understand, to piece together what I had done, what had led me here. The girl knew. She had always known. Her grin spread slowly, stretching too far, too wide, her lips splitting at the edges but never bleeding, never stopping. Her body remained still, only her mouth moving, stretching, her dark eyes locked on me like she was expecting something, like she was waiting for me to react, to break, to run. I couldn't move. The air thickened, pressing down on me, forcing my breath shallow. The hum in my chest grew sharp, like something whispering just below my heartbeat, something forming words I couldn't hear. The woods rustled. The branches groaned under a weight I couldn't see. Something was coming, and the girl was smiling because she knew I couldn't leave. Something snapped inside me. The pressure, the wrongness, the shifting space, I couldn't take it anymore. My body moved before my mind could catch up, a burst of desperation overriding every rational thought. I stepped forward and drove my foot straight into the girl's chest. The impact was solid, too solid. She wasn't a child, not really, not anymore. But she still flew backward, her thin frame tumbling, rolling, disappearing down the hill like a broken doll. For a moment, everything was still. Then the sound began. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a cry. It was a voice, stretched and distorted, spiraling through the air as if the wind itself had learned how to speak. It didn't fade as she fell. It stayed, filling the space around me, echoing off the barren land, repeating itself in layers, overlapping, folding in on itself like the sound was breaking apart just to put itself back together again. The trees groaned, the ground vibrated. The sky pulsed in time with the hum in my chest. The woods had woken up. I turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The space around me had unraveled, the land shifting, curling into itself. The trees weren't where they had been. The crosses had moved, repositioned, realigned, as if something had been waiting for this moment, as if something had been waiting for me. I had to wake up. I forced it, willed it, clawed my way back to consciousness. The moment snapped like a rubber band, and I was yanked backwards, spiraling, falling through nothing. Then I was in my bed. The air was too still, the room too dark. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, my breath sharp and uneven. I was awake, I told myself. I was back. It was over. But the hum hadn't stopped. It was quieter now, buried beneath my skin, sitting just under my pulse. Something had followed me back, and it wasn't going to let go. Tonight's story couldn't have happened without the help of the lovely supporters on screen. Your generosity keeps these stories alive, and I can't thank you enough. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you want to support the channel and get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes updates, and even early story releases, consider joining my Patreon. Every bit helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and stay out of the woods.